I get it. I get it. There are some people in this church who just like to pour salt in a wound.
You opened the door, I have to walk through it.
Fair enough, Rhonda. Fair enough. Ooh. Security, we have a eruption over on this side. Oh, goodness. Yeah, I'm actually wearing my hockey shirt because my Bills lost early in the playoffs, and then my Sabres lost to the Blues yesterday, so I probably shouldn't even be wearing this, but that's the way it is. Hmm?
The Bills did win Wheel of Fortune this week.
That is no consolation. No consolation at all. There's an old saying, you see it on the screen in front of you, a tough row to hoe. It simply refers to those challenging, difficult, and sometimes painful roads that one must take in order to see dreams become a reality. One of the pictures that comes to my mind is of a wounded warrior who returns from the battlefield, maybe as an amputee, who then goes through the placing of a prosthetic, who goes through physical training, strenuous times, feelings of loss, feelings of triumph, until finally he or she can walk again. That doesn't come easy. It is a tough row to hoe. For you and I as Christians, it might refer to our movement from the calling of Christ in our lives to the fulfilling of His purpose for our lives. As we continue to go through the book of Genesis, we're going to fly through about 4 or 5 chapters this morning, and we're going to come back to the exact same text next Sunday, well, 2 Sundays, as we look at the very familiar story of Joseph. Joseph's story covers from chapter 37 through the end of the book of Genesis, chapter 50. The 11th son of Jacob. We encounter him at the age of 17. Do you remember being 17? For me, that was a long time ago. For some of you, even longer. Sorry. But when Joseph was, we're in chapter 37 to get us started. And in the middle of verse 2, it simply says, Joseph, when 17 years of age, was pasturing the flock with his brothers, while he was still a youth, along with the sons of Bilhah, the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought back a bad report about them to their father. Now, are any of you the youngest? And did you ever tattle on the older? Yeah. And how did that make your older brother and sister feel? You know? That's what happens here. Whatever the situation was, when the family gathers again, Joseph goes, Dad, Reuben and Simeon, they're slacking off in the shepherding department. I kept track of everything they did wrong. Want to see? You know. And that just doesn't make the older brothers at all happy. To compound the issue, and I'm sure it's your case, Jen, the younger is often the favorite. Of course, she says. As we read on in verse 3, it says, Now Israel, remember who is Israel? Israel's Jacob. His name has been changed. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a multicolored tunic. And his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms, or a better translation is they could not speak to him in peace. Every word out of their mouths toward their little brother was filled with animosity, with hatred, with venom. Favored son, hated brother. Point 1. Favored son, hated brother. Joseph brings back this report. Jacob loves him more. His brothers, they hate him. But then we get the unfolding of this story that's going to carry on for 13 chapters. Joseph is a dreamer. And not the kind of dreams that you and I might have of, sitting there when we're supposed to be working, but our minds are off to some other place and we're doing something grand. But a dream, a vision in the night that God gives to him of something that's going to happen in the distant future. And in dream 1, the interpretation is that a day will come when all of Joseph's brothers are going to bow down to him. And he has the gall to share that dream with his brothers who already hate him. Talk about pouring salt in the wound, Rhonda. And we actually read in verse 8 his brother's reaction. Are you actually going to reign over us? Are you really going to rule over us? So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. This isn't just sibling rivalry. This is hatred. But then Joseph has a second dream. And in his second dream, adding to the bowing down of his brothers, we also get the bowing down of his mother and father. The first part of the story being difficult, but in that ancient culture, adding mother and father, the respected patriarch of the family, to this bowing down, not acceptable. Even Jacob will take offense to this. His father in verse 10 rebuked him and said, "What is this dream that you've had? Shall I and your mother and your brothers actually come to bow ourselves down before you on the ground?" And his brothers add to their hatred for him a jealousy of him in verse 11. Now, I don't know what you might have done to your older or younger siblings. I have absolutely no recollection of this. My brother is 11 years older than me. And he claims to this day, do you remember when we were little, those little plastic carpentry toys, and it's got like the little pegs and you have a plastic hammer and you can beat them in? He says that he was sleeping and I pounded his nose. I say that if I did, he deserved it. I don't know what you might have done, but Jacob's brothers, you know the story, don't you? His brothers are filled with a murderous intent. In chapter 37, hear how far this goes. In verse 18, when they saw him from a distance, this is the brothers, they're out tending the sheep again. Joseph is coming to them on father's directions. When they saw him from a distance, and before he came close to them, they plotted against him to put him to death. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come, let us kill him, throw him into one of the pits. We'll say a wild beast devoured him. Then let's see what will become of his dreams." Murderous intent. But the hand of God stays their animosity, and instead, he is sold into slavery. First sold to a traveling band of merchants, a band of Ishmaelites. Interesting, isn't it? Distant cousins, if you go back in the story. And when they arrive in Egypt, they sell him to Potiphar. Potiphar is the captain of Pharaoh's bodyguard. This is a powerful man. This is an important man. This is a man who has the ear of the most powerful individual on the face of the planet in that day and time, the Pharaoh of Egypt. And Potiphar buys a slave, a 17-year-old Hebrew boy. And we turn the page. I'm going to skip for now chapter 38. Chapter 38 is one of those strange ones. As a matter of fact, have you ever read Genesis? There's a lot of strange stuff in Genesis. We may come back to chapter 38. I haven't decided yet or not, just to be honest with you. But when we get to chapter 39, after this brief one-chapter interlude, we find that now Joseph, this is verse 1, had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. Now, you know the story, do you not? He was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. His master saw that the Lord was with him and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in his charge. And it came about that from the time he made him overseer in his house and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge, and with him there he did not concern himself with anything except for the food which he ate. God, who had spoken in a dream, continues to guide the days of Joseph's life. And he blesses him. He is a slave, but he becomes an honored slave. Potiphar made him overseer of his entire household. All is good. But the latter part of verse 6 says, now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. Those words have never been spoken of me, but I live with the reality. Joseph was, I don't know what kids say nowadays, but Joseph was a hunk. Okay. He had abs. I have a keg. He was ripped. I'm just worn. Joseph, he's handsome in form. He's muscular. And he's handsome in appearance. Now, I don't know what makes for pretty, but he was a fine-looking young fellow. And that drew the attention, you know the story, don't you? That drew the attention of Potiphar's wife. She's looking at this young servant in the house, and she's going, he's pretty. And now the scene is set for disaster. Because as Potiphar is off doing the work as the captain of Pharaoh's guard, Mrs. Potiphar begins to seek to seduce Joseph. Come and lie with me. Come to bed with me. And Joseph rejects her advances time and time again. Now forgive me for the coarseness of the old saying, like tough row to hoe, but hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And Mrs. Potiphar, she's not happy. Her feelings are, am I not attractive to you? Am I not appealing to you? Her pride is hurt. Her sense of power is hurt. Don't you know who my husband is? And because Joseph will not succumb to her temptations, she falsely accuses him. One day when he's working in the house, she actually literally physically takes a hold of him. He flees by leaving his cloak behind. Now she has evidence. She has Joseph's DNA. And when Potiphar comes home, that slave of yours, he attacked me. A sexual assault. And I screamed and he ran. And here's his cloak to prove it. No trial. No defense. Potiphar has Joseph thrown in prison. Trusted slave. Falsely accused. That's point 2. Well, we get to chapter 40. Remember how God blessed Joseph even as a slave in Potiphar's household? Now he's in prison and God blesses Joseph. Not with release from prison, but everything that in the prison that he started. Maybe he's working in the kitchen. Maybe he's working in the laundry. I don't know what his responsibilities are. But everything he puts his hand to flourishes. God blesses him. And the chief jailer, taking note of this, says, this is pretty cool. I'll tell you what, Joseph, you're in charge of everything in here underneath my authority. Notice what's happening in Joseph's life? It's very up and down, isn't it? Very up and down. And so he is in prison, and he finds himself with a couple of inmates, the chief baker and the chief cupbearer to Pharaoh. You know, the baker who, it's time to make the donuts. Anyone remember those old commercials? It's time to make the donuts. And he'd get up and he would bake all of the pastries and all the breads for Pharaoh's household for the day. But whatever he had done, I don't know. Maybe he got the icing on the wrong side of the donut. I don't know. But he's in prison. And the chief cupbearer. That's an important job. It's not just, hey, bring me something to drink here. But it's also the sampling. Is there poison in the drink? He's Pharaoh. And the cupbearer would take a sip, and they would wait a while. Does his eyes get little X's on it, and he falls over like in a cartoon strip? And whatever he had done, maybe he had spilled the wine, I don't know, but he's in prison. And they each have a dream. And Joseph says, the interpretation of dreams lies with God. See, he doesn't say, I can do this. He says, interpretations lie with God. God can do this. Let's see if he'll give me some insight and understanding. And he tells the baker the interpretation of his dream. Hey, not such good news. Pharaoh's going to have you hung. And he tells the cupbearer, much better news, you're going to be reinstated. Will you do me a favor? When Pharaoh reinstates you, will you tell him about my plight? I don't deserve to be here. Will you remember me? Will you tell him my story? Chapter 40, the last verse, verse 23, says this. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. That's kind of sad, isn't it? I got my freedom. I'm back where I belong. Joseph is a distant memory, out of sight, out of mind. And Joseph continues to waste away in the dungeons of Egypt. Well, the story of Joseph is filled with dreams. He's had two. Bakers had one. Cupbearers had one. Who has the next dream? Aaron, tell me. Who has the next dream? Pharaoh. Pharaoh, played by Elvis himself. If ever you have watched Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, starring Donny Osmond, or better yet, Aaron Jones. Pharaoh has a dream, and it leaves him troubled. And all of his wise men have no insight. They cannot interpret it for him. Chapter 41, verse 8 tells us. And all of a sudden, the cupbearer goes, oh, wait a minute, Joseph. And he begs audience with Pharaoh and says, when I was in prison along with the baker, and he tells the story, and this is what happened. There's this Hebrew slave in prison, and he tells dreams. And in chapter 41, verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came to Pharaoh. And Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream. You remember? 7 years of abundance, 7 years of famine. You're going to have harvests unlike any that you have ever had, but prepare wisely because famine is coming, a long famine. And people are going to go hungry. And Pharaoh says, you know, no one could really figure this out except you, Joseph. I'll tell you what. I'm going to put you over this entire project. I'm going to let you figure out how best to store up food for 7 years and how to distribute it later for 7 years. 14-year job security for you here in the government offices of Egypt. Matter of fact, since it's so important, I am going to make you second in power in all of Egypt, second only to me. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? And so, that is how it plays out. Would you say that Joseph's path was a tough road to hoe? I would. Favored son, but hated brother. Whose brothers were going to kill him lest the hand of the Lord stayed them, so he sold into slavery. Don't forget that the brothers told Dad, sorry, Joseph's dead. And Jacob lived with that anguish for several chapters. But then, hey, he's a slave in the home of a powerful man, and he's given great freedom and responsibility even as a slave in that household. Everything's good until he's falsely accused of sexual assault. And now he's in prison. But in prison, God blesses his hand, and even though he's not free, he is given tremendous responsibility, and he's respected by his fellow prisoners, and it's good, but then he's forgotten. And then God lifts him up, and we're not quite to the fulfilling of his first 2 dreams. We'll get there in 2 weeks. Make sure you come back for the rest of that story. But what's going on is there is a why to this. In my introduction, I said, maybe for you and I as Christians, the tough road to hoe is that move from the calling of Christ on our lives to the fulfilling of his purpose in our lives. There is a why to all of this in the story. In Genesis chapter 45, the words are on the screen. Now do not be grieved or angry with yourselves. He's speaking to his brothers at a later day, okay? Because you sold me here, for God sent me in front of you, sent me before you to preserve life. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant in the earth and to keep you alive by a great deliverance. Now, therefore, it was not you who sent me here, but God. Oh, Lord, could not you have sent me here by an easier road? Did it have to be so tough? But see, there was purpose. What? To preserve life. To preserve a remnant for you. Who is the you? The children, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The people through whom God has promised to do what? Redeem all humanity. If a famine had wiped out the descendants of Abraham, the promise of God to send a Savior would have had to have been detoured. So God fulfills his purpose in and through Joseph, even though the road was a very hard one. Later in chapter 50, almost to the end of the book, Joseph said to them, again to his brothers, do not be afraid. Am I in God's place? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good in order to bring about this present result, to preserve many people alive. We can go to the New Testament. In the book of Acts chapter 9, verses 15 and 16, speaking of the Apostle Paul, A man by the name of Ananias is sent to talk to Paul after he's had the blinding vision of Jesus. And God says to Ananias, "Go, for Paul is a chosen instrument of mine to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel, and I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake." Now there's a recruiting line, don't you think? You remember the old recruiting posters? The Navy. It's not a job. It's an adventure. You attested to that one, aren't you, Richie? Paul's invitation from God is, "I'll show you how much you must suffer for my name's sake." And it did not deter him. Or how about Peter? In John chapter 21, verses in 18 and 19, Peter has been kind of reinstated by Jesus, feed my sheep and these kind of things, the do you love me? But then we read that Jesus revealed to Peter the kind of death by which he would glorify God. Hey, Peter, it's going to be an adventure, but hey, this is how you're going to die. You're going to stretch out your arms, and people are going to lead you where you do not want to go. And this foreshadowed the kind of death that he would die. What does that look like? The death his Lord died. A tough road to hoe. How about you and me? In Luke chapter 14, verse 27, Jesus, talking about counting the cost of discipleship, says, "Whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple." It's become very popular in our day and age of the church, especially in Western civilization, to constantly talk about, come to Jesus and man, it's going to be sweet. You're going to be rich. You're going to be healthy. You're never going to have a struggle in life again. But Jesus says something quite different. He says, following me isn't easy. Following me is a tough row to hoe. Matter of fact, as with Joseph, you may be hated by your family. I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but if you decide to follow Jesus, there may be people who do not like who you become and what you stand for because they prefer the ways of this world. You may be falsely accused by those who refuse to join, by those you refuse to join in evil.